Hola, hello. I just said hola. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we're doing a Thai noodle dish called Pad See Ew. If you've never caught one of these streams before, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. With new recipes out over on my YouTube channel every Friday. Today we're doing a recipe for a Pad See Ew, which we came out with over on the channel. I think that was sometime in the winter. Like back in December or so, something like that. I should start looking these things up before I start the stream. But if you're interested in finding out more about those recipes, they all live over on the YouTube channel. If you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, that's the channel you're already on. Those recipes, they tend to move a little bit slower and kind of don't really ramble as much. I guess I ramble a lot in these streams. So they're also a little bit easier to follow if you're trying to reproduce the things that we're cooking on stream too. So that's a fun place to start if you are trying to cook more stuff. Today we're doing a Pad See Ew, which we haven't done in a while. And the main reason that we haven't done Pad See Ew in a while is because pretty recently, I think a couple of months ago, maybe a month or two ago, we came out with a recipe for a Pad Kimao, which is very, very similar to Pad See Ew. And I've been in the habit of doing Pad Kimao more lately for no real reason in particular other than I've just been doing it a lot. What I discovered when I started working out the, actually I think I discovered this more when I started doing the Pad See Ew recipe. But what I discovered is that a Pad See Ew and a Pad Kimao, they're very, very similar dishes. I would say borderline the same dishes except for a handful of ingredients that come in and out. What I found is that they look very, very similar. A Pad See Ew, the main difference between a Pad See Ew and a Pad Kimao is that a Pad Kimao has more vegetables in it. So usually you would find in a Pad Kimao you would come across things like probably a red bell pepper. Sometimes you come across onion. Sometimes you come across other kinds of vegetables, along with the gailan or broccoli, which we're going to be using today. So that has always been generally one of the reasons why I've kind of been leaning more towards doing the Pad Kimao lately, more than the Pad See Ew. Mostly just because I happen to have a lot of vegetables in my pantry a lot lately, so I've just been trying to find ways of using them up. So both pretty much the same sauce base and marinade base, though. So outside of those inclusions of those two vegetables, they're essentially the same thing. So we're going to dive into all of that, and we'll talk a little bit about how come I have so much trouble working with Chow Fun. So we're going to take a look at this stuff. So if you've never come across fresh Chow Fun before, it comes prepackaged like this. It is very fresh. When I say fresh, I mean like you will generally only see grocery stores in Chinatown stock this stuff probably like once a day. And generally when you see those stocked, they'll probably be stocked in very, very small quantities. So usually at the corner store, actually I happen to live across the street from 2 or 3 corner stores that sell fresh Chow Fun, which is pretty nice. But generally, when I come across them in the grocery stores, I'll probably see maybe like 20 packs of chow fun. So when they sell out of those 20, they're pretty much out and they stop selling it from there. And a lot of the times when you come across fresh chow fun in a grocery store in Chinatown, a lot of the times the restaurants are going to swipe a lot of those up. So in a couple of the grocery stores that are near me, I see them, they sell it in like really huge quantities. So they'll sell like fresh chow fun in like bags of like 40-pound bags of fresh chow fun, which is like absolutely insane. Nobody is using 40 pounds of fresh chow fun unless you're running a restaurant. So that's the conclusion that I drew. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we'll get to all of that stuff in a minute. But right now, this is my garlic, which I just finished crushing and mincing. And this right here was I think we did 6. I usually go for 6 to 8 Thai chilies. And what I've come to determine is that Thai chili probably one of the most important things that you can put in a dish like this, because it's where all of that really iconic Thai heat comes from. I have on many occasions worked around it and subbed it out with other things. So I've subbed it out with a jalapeno pepper. You could sub it out with like a serrano pepper. You could probably sub it with something like a Fresno pepper, things like that. Pretty much any kind of pepper will kind of get you something similar, but it's not going to be the same kind of flavor or the same kind of quality of heat. And it's definitely not going to get you that iconic sort of like Thai heat that you would associate with most Thai food. It's coming from those Thai chilies. So if you can get your hands on it, the more that I've experimented with Thai cooking, those Thai chilies really, really important. And I actually found somewhere in Chinatown that sells them, so that's pretty useful. Ooh, tom yum. Yeah, that's actually on my list of things to do. I might try and do it this weekend. I've kind of been putting it off because it's been really hot and I don't really want to cook a soup when it's really hot. But the main reason that I've been putting off tom yum is because, and I can show you guys. I've been waiting to do tom yum until I could get my hands on some galangal root, which looks like this. And it looks like this crazy alien baby. Galangal root, really, really important to Thai food, and for whatever reason, I don't know why it took me so long to find this stuff, but it was really hard for me to locate. Galangal root and kaffir lime leaf, both of which took a super long time for me to track down. So, but yeah, tom yum on my list of things to do. What's really interesting about galangal root is that it kind of looks a lot like ginger. Lots of people even say that you can substitute them interchangeably, but they are not the same thing at all. They're very, very different flavors. They look super similar, and I've even seen some people refer to it as like Thai ginger, but they are very, very different flavors and very, very different aromatic quality to it. So I have never tried to, or like even thought about using those two things interchangeably, even though they look so similar. But so for today, for our pad see ew, I'm going with, this is just some plain old ginger. We're giving this a fine mince. And a fine mince, the real trick to a fine mince is just make sure your knife is really sharp. I found that's the most important part. And as long as you have a real good knife, a real sharp knife, that stuff, it should mince. And then from there, it's just about persistence. I'll do it. Yeah. So those are what we were going to refer to now as our aromatic elements of our wok fry. You will see me refer to those terms very, very often in a lot of the recipes that we do. So we'll call this garlic, ginger, and our Thai chilies. These are going to be the 3 aromatic elements that we use. And the reason that we call them aromatics is because we're specifically looking for their aromatic qualities. So these 2, very, very often you're going to see me using garlic and ginger in a lot of recipes, pretty much every recipe. Thai chili, not super often, but pretty much every Thai recipe that I've ever done is using Thai chilies. Next up, we're going to be using some plain old broccoli today. So today I'm using broccoli, probably the most common, or at least the most traditional thing to use in a pad kima, or a pad see ew, excuse me. Will actually be another similar, not really that similar, but pretty similar, Chinese vegetable called gailan, or Chinese broccoli, as you will commonly see it colloquially referred to. I've never really liked gailan, so I've always kind of avoided it. It's been one of those vegetables where I kind of was force-fed it a lot when I was a kid, so I've always avoided it as an adult. mostly because I just have like really bad associations with it. So if you like gailan, absolutely throw that stuff in. I usually will just go for regular old broccoli though, because it's my preference. But definitely the most traditional thing that you would see in a Thai pad see ew recipe like this would be gailan, not broccoli. This is definitely an American addition. What is really particularly unique about our use of broccoli today, though, is that broccoli, very, very often when you come across broccoli in a dish like, probably like in most American uses of broccoli, you will see it par cooked. So super often when you see broccoli come up, you'll see something like it will be blanched first. It might be boiled. Sometimes it'll be steamed. Sometimes you'll see it like baked or broiled. It'll be under like the broiler. You might see it done in like a foil bag on a barbecue. All of these things, essentially what we're trying to do is break down the really, really sturdy qualities of broccoli. So you'll notice it has this very, very fibrous texture to it, which is part of what makes it so healthy. What's tricky about what we're going to do today is that we're actually not going to do any kind of par cooking. So this is going to go straight into our wok fry, which is particularly tricky because that wok heat is not going to be, we're not going to have a really, really long time in the wok with this broccoli, which means that we have to make sure that we are chopping it appropriately so that when it gets into the wok, it is able to cook at least some of the way through. So that's pretty tricky. What essentially it means is that what I'm doing right now is when I'm chopping this broccoli up, you'll notice that I'm not just chopping it into florets and then tossing it. I'm chopping it into thin florets. So we have like our larger pieces, that's going to look something like this. And what would happen is if we took a large piece of broccoli like this and we threw it into a wok fry, it would more or less just sort of fall. It would not really cook all the way through. You would end up with like a pretty undercooked piece of broccoli, or maybe even a burnt piece of broccoli if you tried to overcook it. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm generally trying to chop this in the size and shape of what a gailan would look like, which is long and thin. So what we're looking for is like these really, really long, narrow spears of broccoli that are going to saute really well in really, really high heat for a really short amount of time. So remember, when these are going into the wok, they're really only the only cook time that they're going to have in the wok will probably be maybe like 3 minutes, maybe even less than that, maybe like 2-3 minutes at most. So what we're trying to do is we're going to cook these for a very brief amount of time at very, very high heat. And that's going to be how we yield these really, really crispy pieces of wok fried veggie. You're always sweating your balls off. Yeah, that was what I have discovered is something that you can pretty easily dial up and down. So that's also the same reason why you can go into a Thai restaurant and they'll ask you how spicy you want it, and you could say mild, and it barely changes the recipe. And the reason for that is what they're doing is they're essentially just, that's the measure of like how many chilies to throw in it. So today I'm using 6. It probably ends up being like relatively, like a little bit spicy, but not super spicy in any way. So if you like are particularly averse to spicy stuff, it's not going to give you too much problems. If you want it to be super spicy, you could use like 10 or 12, and that will get you a really, really hot pad see ew. But I found that like just like keeping tabs on how many chilies you throw in, that's going to be a really easy way of determining how spicy your pad see ew gets. So that's our broccoli. I just gave this a wash, and then what I'm doing is I'm shaking all of this water out. So again, I say this all the time too, but it's super, super important when we use something that has been washed, that we have to shake out all of the water that gets left behind. So if you're really committed, you might even get a salad spinner out. We want these things to be as dry as we can get it, for the reason that when they get into the wok, we don't also want to be throwing in a bunch of water, because the more water that we introduce into a wok, the more trouble that we're going to have keeping that wok hot. So we want to minimize the amount of water that ends up in our wok. All right. Next up, this is just 2 eggs that we're going to whisk up. We're going to throw those into our wok at the very end, and that's going to give us this nice coating of egg to our chow fun. I want to do this? Yeah, I'm going to do this right now. All right, next up is our meat element. So today we're going to be working with, this is chicken thigh. You could also use chicken breasts too. I've gone back and forth, but I am a little bit more partial to using chicken thigh in this particular dish, mostly because I've found that what's going to happen is, so we've got all of this fat going on our chicken thigh, which you would not have if you had chicken breast, because it's going to be a little bit leaner. So all of this fat, it's going to render into our wok fry. So I'm not going to slice it off. I actually want to keep that on. And that's going to give us this really, really thick element to our wok fry. So I like to use chicken thigh specifically for that reason. If you want something leaner, you can absolutely use chicken breast. They will both work just fine. I've done it with chicken breast all the time. But I found that the inclusion of that little bit of extra fat kind of helps get that sauce to be a little bit more thick and like luxurious. But otherwise though, I don't really taste a huge difference between the dark meat and light meat. So what I'm doing is I'm slicing these in long, thin strips. I like going for long, thin strips. Mostly what I'm doing is I'm imitating the shape and size of the broccoli that we just finished cutting. So we're trying to keep things in similar shapes and sizes for our bite. And again, I'm leaving all of this fat on so that when it comes to render in our wok fry, that's going to add a nice thick fatty element to our wok fry. You can also use, I did this in the pad ki mao recipe too, but you can also use a ground mince at this point. So I've used ground pork quite a bit. You can use ground turkey or ground chicken, probably be the most common thing to use. I like the use of chicken thigh in this particular dish, but any of those things will work. In the pad ki mao recipe though, we did use chicken, I think we used ground pork actually. All right, so that's our chicken. We gotta clean a bunch of stuff. Yeah. Cool, so next up we're going to do a quick marinade on this chicken. So a couple of these things are kind of optional, but what I like to do, this is actually one of my go-to marinades. A lot of the times you'll see me use this marinade when I don't know what else to use. So this is going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. Followed by, where's the white pepper? Well, this is the Shaoxing. A tablespoon of Shaoxing wine, which is a Chinese cooking wine. It's going to give us a little bit of brightness and acidity introduced to our marinade. That acidity is also going to help start breaking down some of the qualities of the chicken, so it will help it tenderize if you let it sit for long enough. Lots of times, probably most of the times that I use marinades, they don't really sit for long enough in order to really start getting any tenderness out of it, so I have not particularly noticed much of that happening. But if you're really committed, this marinade, it should sit for at least 30 minutes. I have not let my marinade go for 30 minutes in a while, mostly because I'm too hungry and I don't feel like waiting that long. Then that's a pinch of kosher salt. And finally, the last and maybe most important ingredient, this is going to be half a teaspoon of cornstarch. So the reason that you'll see me using cornstarch in a lot of meat marinades, pretty much every meat marinade that I do, if I take the time to marinate something, I'm probably going to use cornstarch in it, is because when we add cornstarch, or really any kind of starch to a marinade like this, what it does is it coats the exterior of that chicken, so it kind of like slows down that cook time just long enough until the interior of the chicken can sort of catch up. So it kind of prevents the chicken from getting super rubbery for just long enough so that like everything can cook evenly. So that's kind of important, or that's super important when you have really, really high wok heat like we have today, because without that cornstarch, it would absolutely overcook in that really, really high heat. All right, so our chicken. Next up is going to be our sauce element. So this is a similar sauce element that I have used. It is the exact same sauce that we used in the pad kimao, but it is a very, very similar sauce that we used in the beef chow fun recipe. It's the same, pretty similar thing that we used in the Shanghainese lion's head meatballs. Lots of things that involve dark soy sauce, they're going to look pretty similar here. So that's 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. And then, so the 3 things that you'll see me use quite a bit. When we're using dark soy sauce, this is going to be 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce. Followed by 2 tablespoons of black vinegar. And 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce. So all 3 of these things, you'll notice they're all 3, pretty much our whole sauce right now, is of a deep and like dark brown caramel color. So that's going to be where that really iconic coloring comes from in a dish like pad see ew. It's the same reason why it comes up. These 3 ingredients, they come up in the pad kimao recipe. Same reason that we're doing it in the beef chow fun recipe. Pretty much anywhere where you'll see me using dark soy sauce, those 3 things are going to be used all together at the same time. It's because they're really adding that really dark color and that really rich flavor. So I have reused this sauce in a lot of occasions because I found that it works in a lot of those situations. Next up, this is going to be 4 tablespoons or a 1/4 cup of fish sauce. And finally, 2 tablespoons of sambal oelek. I've experimented with a bunch of different hot sauces for this. I've done it with doubanjiang before. I've also done it with gochujang. I've also just experimented with leaving it out. Sambal oelek, if you're not familiar with it, this is the stuff that you'll see on the Lazy Susans in restaurants, so it'll be like next to the soy sauce. It's really tasty if you use it with like dumplings and you combine it with some soy sauce. So what I like to do a lot of the times, what I'll do is I'll serve the pad see ew on the table with some sambal oelek on the side, and then you can kind of add that to your taste. But I also like to fold it into the wok fry a little bit too. So that's our sauce. And then last up, finally, is going to be our fresh chow fun noodles. So at this point, if you've watched one of these streams before, you will have seen me talk about a lot of chow fun, because I have had so much trouble working with chow fun. First, we could take a look. It is very nice and easily labeled in English if you're not sure if you were buying the right stuff. If it isn't labeled, what we're looking for are these big, wide rice noodles. So they're long, flat, have these nice, luxurious, and very thin quality to it. And this is the noodle that you would come across in a lot of Thai food for sure. It is not the noodle that you would see in pad Thai, but it is the noodle that you'll see in pad see ew, pad kimao. It's the noodle that is obviously in beef chow fun. Pretty much any time that you come across a rice noodle, it's probably going to be some form of this. What's the purpose of adding heat? Oh, it's really good. Yeah, I mean, I like adding the heat element anytime that I can. And just sort of like folding it in. You can also add it on the table, or you could leave it out too if you want. I find that I like to fold it into the wok fry a little bit, just so it's like a little bit more thoroughly combined. So you can absolutely add it on the table, but what will happen is it's not going to fold in quite as well. So you kind of have to like add little bits of it at a time, and then you'll find that it's not quite going to disperse in the same way. So I like to add it while it's still on in the wok, so we can sort of fold everything together. Good question, though. Misty, oh, you love watching and learning. Yeah, I'm glad that people are learning from this streams. All right, so this is our chow fun rice noodle. What I'm doing here is I'm very carefully, so chow fun, first off, we want to talk about chow fun. It is very delicate, so I am very delicately and very gently pulling these noodles apart. So our goal here is, so if you've ever worked with chow fun before, you'll know that it is very easy, if you are too aggressive with the way that you work with your chow fun, to let this stuff just sort of break apart, and then you kind of end end up with like basically like spoonfuls of chow fun noodle. It sort of like just turns into like a porridgey quality, just because like everything just sort of breaks apart, and then you end up with just like tiny little bits and pieces of chow fun. So I have definitely done that on more than 5 occasions. I have lost track of how many times I've messed up things with chow fun. So what we want to do is I'm very carefully and very gently pulling these noodles apart one at a time. That's a little bit tedious. It kind of adds maybe 5 minutes to your cook time, but I found that it's really, really important. What we don't want to do, and I have also done this too, is you don't want to just go and drop this whole brick of chow fun into the wok. I have absolutely done that before. The reason for that is you might get away with it. It might be okay, especially these right now. These are really, really fresh chow fun. I bought these like 2 hours ago, I think. So these are really, really fresh. So you might actually get away with it with something like this. But very, very likely, probably more likely what will happen is if you drop this whole brick of chow fun into the wok fry, it's not going to break apart. And then you're just going to have a brick of pad see ew, which is not going to be fun. And either that, or if you drop the whole thing in and it doesn't quite break apart, you're going to have to use a lot of really aggressive tossing in order to break it apart, and then you're going to end up breaking up the chow fun, which is also not what we're after. So our goal here is to make sure that these noodles don't break apart. So we want the longest pieces of chow fun that we can possibly preserve in our wok fry. Yeah. So what I like to do is I like to pull these apart one at a time. The other thing that I'll also mention is that chow fun is very perishable. So within maybe 24 hours, it starts going stale. I would say like you have a maximum of like maybe 18 hours. After that, it really starts turning stale. You can kind of start saving it at a certain point if you forget, or if you like don't have time to cook that chow fun up. You can kind of save it by popping it in the microwave and heat it up for maybe a minute and a half or so. And it will start like reheating and then like kind of pulling that chow fun apart a little bit. But it's still not going to be quite the same, and you're going to run into issues where that chow fun is going to start breaking apart. It will still be edible, but you're not going to get these really, really long and luxurious strands of noodles. So what I like to say is that if you plan on cooking chow fun, hit the market the day of, so not even the day before. Hit the market the morning of, and you're going to want to get there pretty early because they sell out really early too. So get there relatively early, probably before noon, before the restaurants get their hands on these things, and make sure that you buy it fresh. So what you want to do is give it a squeeze, make sure that that stuff isn't really, really stale. It's not like breaking apart. You can tell pretty immediately if it's stale. It's got like this really, really like stale and like crumbly texture to it. It shouldn't be crumbly in any way. It should be pretty luxurious and squishy. So that's our chow fun. We're not going to do anything else to this. This is all we're going to do is just pull those things apart. And then from there, these are just going to go straight into our wok fry. Yeah. So lots of caution to talk about when I talk about chow fun, because if lots of people have watched these streams before, you'll know I have messed up these things so often. I've messed them up on recipe videos. I have done, I think when we did I started testing the pad see ew recipe, I think I had to do it. I think it was one of the only recipes that I had to do like 5 or 6 times. I literally redid that recipe like 5 times before I got it right. So if you're working with fresh chow fun, it's real difficult, but I guarantee you it's so worth it. It's so much better than the dried stuff, so you can totally get like freeze-dried rice noodles. They're gonna work fine too. But it's sort of like the difference between like dried fettuccine and like fresh fettuccine. It's very, very different and totally worth it. Yeah. What's my favorite fish sauce? Good question. I was actually going to say I don't have a preference, but I do actually have a big preference. And I actually never paid attention to what it's called. So this is the fish sauce that I use. It's called Viet Huang. There's another fish sauce that I have used that I did not like, and it's I forget what it's called now, but I had a lot of problems with it, and it was a lot more dense. So I like using this particular fish sauce. It's also the one that you most commonly will come across in like most markets and stuff. So most Asian markets. If you try and find fish sauce in like say like Safeway, if you're in California, you can totally find fish sauce in Safeway. But it's going to be like the cheaper brands that add a bunch of stuff to the fish sauce. So they'll like add a bunch of sugar. They'll probably add some kind of coloring to it. I like this particular brand of Viet Huong because it doesn't have very much additives, so it just kind of tastes like you get the fish sauce and that's pretty much all you get. Alright, so I've got my wok heating up right now. We're going to let that thing go for maybe a minute before we get started, and then we'll start doing some cooking. RKK6, yeah, how's it going? Has my band started playing? Yeah, we did. We played our first show 2 weeks ago, I think. Tracer Pete has officially returned to the stage. We're playing stuff. Not quite at the same volume that we were before COVID. We were playing like twice a week at least. I think we were pretty much touring full time. So not quite at the same volume as we were before COVID happened, but it's definitely started to gig, and it's been pretty surreal. It's been fun. Well, I started posting about it on the Instagram too, actually, so if you want to follow along with that band, Tracer Pete. Yeah. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on my YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday, we did a recipe for Korean gimbap, which is like a rice roll. Kind of looks like a piece of sushi, but it's got a lot of different stuff going on in it. It's got some barbecue beef. This Friday, as in tomorrow, coming up is going to be Chinese crepes, which is called a jianbing. And that's sort of like a Chinese street food classic that you come across a lot. Because it's a crepe, it's like nice and handheld. So it's got a Chinese donut that's folded in called a youtiao, or oil stick. That's coming up tomorrow. Friday after that, I forget what we're coming up with after that. But lots of fun stuff like that living over on the YouTube channel. That's also where the schedule of live streams lives. So if you want to find out what we're going to be cooking next, I'm pretty sure that schedule goes out at least 3 weeks. That schedule probably has more information than I know off the top of my head even. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff, definitely hop over to the YouTube and check out what's going on over there. We're working our way to 4,500 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over, give it a subscribe. Lots of fun stuff. Yeah. Gorgeous noodle. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love Chow Fun. Chow Fun is my favorite noodle right now. I hate working with it. I find it a very, very difficult noodle to work with. But if you could get used to figuring out how to work around how delicate Chow Fun is, it's very, very rewarding, and I highly recommend it. It's one of the only things that I will go out of my way and like go to the market explicitly to make sure that I have fresh Chow Fun. Lots of times if my garlic isn't super fresh, I'll still just use the garlic. But I have absolutely refused to use stale Chow Fun at this point. Alright, so we're starting off with our aromatics here. That's my garlic and my ginger. And then you'll notice that we're holding off on those Thai chilies right now. We're going to use those in a second. So I'm giving that a quick toss. We're looking for that to be fragrant here, so use your nose. Usually for me it's about 10 seconds, but start smelling. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, you know you're ready to go. Then I'm adding my chicken here, but you'll notice that I'm going to be very careful about holding back the liquid of my marinade here. So I'm just adding the chicken. And all of that soy sauce and that fish sauce, everything that we put in here that was liquid, I'm holding back on it. So here's all of the liquid in our marinade. This is staying in the bowl. That's for a couple of reasons. The main reason is we're trying to reduce the amount of moisture, just like we always do when we're cooking in a wok. We're trying to make sure that we reduce as much as possible the liquid that's in a wok, and that's going to help us keep the wok hot. The other and also very important reason why we're holding back all of that liquid marinade is because if you dump a bunch of cold liquid into a very hot wok filled with hot oil, what's going to happen is it's going to start splattering and you're going to burn the crap out of your arm, which I have done many times. So, ooh, is the camera freezing a lot tonight? Oh, that's not good. Yeah, that's not good. I heard that it doesn't. It works better on YouTube. So I have a feeling that it might have something to do with the Reddit servers, because the YouTube streams, they never really freeze the way that Reddit has, or at least so I've been told. All right, so you'll notice that cornstarch is going to start coming into play right now. So that you'll notice that the exterior of that chicken, if we didn't have that cornstarch, it would already be cooked on the exterior. And then we would be faced with this problem where we would still be cooking the chicken because the interior of the chicken has not cooked through yet, but the exterior is already cooked. That's going to be a big problem for us, because what will happen is, in order to make sure that that chicken is not raw on the inside, as we would have to let it keep cooking, and then what's going to happen is the exterior of the chicken is going to overcook, and then you're going to have really, really rubbery chicken, which is not so great. All right, so that little bit of extra time that cornstarch buys us, just by slowing down the exterior cook, just sort of helps us keep our chicken nice and tender, so that we don't have to overcook it in order to make sure that it is cooked on the inside. Yeah. All right. So that's our chicken. I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. Oops. So try not to drop stuff. And then what I'm going to do is add a little bit more peanut oil. So this is a process in wok cooking that you will see happen a lot in home range cooking, like we're doing right now. Is a batch cook, which is essentially cooking our first element and then removing it and then cooking our second element. So we're keeping our wok relatively empty here so that we can also keep it relatively hot. So if we left that chicken in and we continued to cook, we would start running into this issue where you wouldn't quite be able to maintain as much heat in the wok once more stuff start filling it up. So by making sure that it stays relatively empty, that helps us keep that wok nice and hot. So that was my Thai chilies going in first. We bloomed it until it was fragrant, and then we're starting with our wok fried broccoli next. Which, if you were watching earlier, we talked a little bit about broccoli has an inherent nature to it in which we need to make sure that it cooks all the way through, because we haven't par cooked it. So broccoli is super, super sturdy vegetable. Very often you will see things like steams or blanches or boiled. Sometimes like a foil bag will be involved. All of those are things that we do with broccoli in order to make sure that it cooks all the way through, because it's so sturdy. So what we've done today is cooked it, or chopped it very, very thinly, and that very thin chop is going to help us make sure that this broccoli does not come out raw. So it is still going to be relatively crispy. That's actually one of my favorite parts about using broccoli in a wok fry, is that it doesn't like get mushy in the way that you very, very often will run into if you do something delicate like an onion. But it is still going to be nice and tender. Oops. So I'm going to let this broccoli go. That will maybe go for another minute, and then we'll start adding everything back to the wok. So what we've essentially done is, by removing that chicken from the wok, while we cook the broccoli, there isn't that chicken kind of floating around, sort of causing that wok to lose heat. So when we have a wok that's still relatively empty, we can get a nice hot flash cook on really, really high heat with our broccoli. I should have a cooking show. I should. Yeah, that would be really fun. I'd like to do a cooking show like on TV, but I also would not like to wander outside of like wok cooking. I found that like when I start straying outside of wok cooking, I don't really know what's going on. So I feel like I know enough about cooking in one specific area of expertise. So there's our chicken thigh going back into the wok. And we did go ahead and drop all of that moisture in the chicken back into. That would be all of our chicken fat. That's going to play a nice role in creating a thick and luxurious sauce. Then next up, we're going to start adding our chow fun here. So very carefully, I'm adding, this is going to be a handful of chow fun at a time. followed by a little bit of the sauce, and repeat. So we're not gonna, again, we're not dumping all of our chow fun in at the same time, because if we did, we would have issues with making sure that that stuff comes apart. But instead, what we're gonna do is add it a little bit at a time, and then very carefully start turning the contents. So we're not gonna do any more aggressive scraping or tossing or really hard throwing around of the wok. No more wok tossing, none of that stuff. I'll do some very gentle shaking, and that's gonna be it. Because we're being careful to make sure that we don't break up that chow fun. The other thing that I'm also not doing, so you'll notice that I'm very gradually adding my sauce mixture. So I'm not just going to dump that sauce straight in, because if we do, we will definitely run into the risk of starting to over season. So kind of depending on a number of factors, depending on how much broccoli you chopped up, how much fat rendered out of that chicken, all kinds of factors, how hot your wok is, all of these things are going to determine how much sauce you actually need. So on plenty of occasions, I have ended up not using all of this sauce, and it's totally fine. Don't feel bad about not using all of it. If you don't need all of it, don't use all of it. This ends up being very, very important anytime that I'm working with dishes that are using dark soy sauce, because it's in particular dishes that are using dark soy sauce, because dark soy sauce is so concentrated that if you're not careful, it is very, very easy to over season with dark soy sauce. It doesn't really look like we're going to use all of it. Yeah, I'm going to reserve, that's going to be about a tablespoon or two that I'm going to hold back tonight. And I think it might be because we used a little bit less broccoli. So the last thing that I'm adding here is going to be my eggs, which we're adding explicitly. We're adding this on top of those noodles. We don't want to add that egg underneath the noodles like you would if you were doing, say, a fried rice, because what we're looking for here, we're not looking for egg curds right now. What we're looking for are eggs that are coating our chow fun. So I'm specifically adding it on top of those noodles, so we get this nice coating of egg that's covering our noodles here. You're a country girl that lives in Tennessee, but you love this type of cooking. Yeah, totally. So I feel like most of these are ingredients that you would be able to locate too in Tennessee. Probably the trickiest thing to locate would be probably that dark soy sauce, or maybe the oyster sauce. But yeah, definitely I'm aware that lots of people have trouble finding a lot of the ingredients that we use in the series. So. Also, if you have any questions about subs, if you're trying one of these recipes, feel free and just hit me up. All right, so I'm tossing very gently here. Right now, all we're really doing is waiting for our eggs to set, and that ought to do it for us. But you'll notice that I'm not aggressively digging in anymore. I'm not throwing things around. We're not doing any kind of shaking, really aggressive shaking at least. We're really just kind of letting things set and then very gently turning those noodles over so that we don't break up any of those strands of chow fun. All right. That ought to do it. So you notice what our eggs have done is we have this nice egg coating that's going around our chow fun. So we don't have these big, large curds of egg that you would if you were doing like fried rice, for example. You would be looking for these big, large scrambled egg curds. Instead, what we have, once the camera's on, oh, there you are these large strands of chow fun that are coated in egg, which is what we're looking for here. Then the last thing that we want to do anytime that we cook in a wok, especially if you have yourself a carbon steel wok or anything that's made out of carbon steel really, I've found that it's really useful to clean that thing while it's hot. Once the carbon steel cools down, it's going to lose that non-stick quality to it. So very, very often, especially if it's got something with egg in it like we're doing right now, it's a lot easier to clean that wok when it's hot. So do yourself a big favor and clean that wok while it's hot. And then I like to do is just reheat it enough so that we can cook off some of this moisture and make sure that the wok is nice and cool or clean. So that took me, I don't know, it took like 10 seconds. It's real tempting to just sit down and start eating because there's food in front of you, you know. But take care of your wok and take an extra 15 seconds and clean it while it's hot. How to do it. Why do we exist? Good question. To serve butter. What is my purpose? All right, let's serve this up. So even now, I'm doing the same thing. I'm being very careful as I serve this chow fun up to make sure that I'm not breaking apart these long strands of noodle. Once again, the chow fun super, super delicate. So especially when you're using something like tongs, especially if you're using metal tongs, which you shouldn't be using, but we are. Don't go digging in and just sort of rooting around for stuff. Be gentle. Make sure that you don't break things apart. Yeah. All right. All right. Let's give this a try. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I love this dish. Relatively easy to do, not a lot of work to chop up. Not a lot of things that even go in it, to be honest. Once you get your hands on that fresh chow fun, it's a pretty simple dish from there. Just like a couple of vegetables to chop up. And you could even sub out that broccoli if you can't get your hands on broccoli. You could throw in maybe like a bell pepper, you could throw in an onion. Anything that you would probably throw into an egg scramble would probably look good too. So you could switch the chicken out for chicken breast, you could use ground pork, you could even use pork, like a pork chop. All of those things would work really well. A lot of things in this dish are super, super interchangeable. I have a feeling because it comes from Thai street food. So a lot of those things are interchangeable in order to make it appropriate for cooking on the street. So yeah. Let me know if you give this recipe a try. Let me make sure and link the recipe too. So I forget to do that a lot. There it is. Yeah, let me know if you give the recipe a try. It's always fun to hear from folks who have tried the recipe. I have definitely seen a lot of folks posting over on the subreddit for Woo Can Cook, taking a shot. I think this is probably the one that I've seen come up the most is people attempting this one. So super, super fun. I know lots of folks. I have talked to at least 2 people that have tried this one and had problems with the dark soy sauce. So if you run into problems, let me know. If you run into problems with the chow fun or the soy sauce or stuff, always fun. And interesting to troubleshoot the recipes with the folks who are trying them. So, is it spicy? It's the right amount of spice for me. So I've used Thai chilies enough times now where I know exactly how many chilies to throw in order to get the level of spice that I'm looking for. What I have found though is that as those chilies get older, they also get spicier, which is crazy. I didn't know that was a thing. So you want to be careful if you're using old Thai chilies. You might run into an issue where they're like more spicy than you're used to. So, but yeah, is it spicy? Like relatively, but not super spicy. Definitely not as spicy as some of the other Thai food that I've had. I've definitely had food where there's like whole shitloads of Thai chili in it, and it's like so hot that you're sweating bullets because you're like sweating out all of the capsaicin basically. So that's real fun. Great tunes, yeah, thank you. Lots of people have been asking about the music. If you're looking for the music, that lives on another channel. It's called Blue Cooks Beats. It's here. Well, that's the Spotify. But yeah, that's another fun channel. That's where all of the music that I've written during COVID lives. So if you're looking for all of that, lots of lo-fi beats and just generally fun stuff to cook to, that live over there. Cool. Thanks everyone. My name is Wes. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on my YouTube channel every Friday. So if you're looking for new stuff to cook, that's a fun place to start because we've got new recipes coming out every Friday. Last Friday we did a recipe for a Korean gimbap, which is a type of rice roll, kind of looks like a sushi roll, but with barbecue beef inside. This Friday coming up, we've got a recipe for a Chinese crepe. Which is it's basically like a French crepe, but it's got a Chinese donut or a youtiao wrapped inside of it, and that's something that you see a lot of Chinese folks eating on the go because it's a street food crepe. So I've read that lots of people will order it or like pick one up on the way to work a lot. That's coming out this Friday. This particular pad see ew was a recipe that we came out with, I think back in December was when we came out with this recipe. So if you're looking for that stuff, it already lives over on the YouTube channel. Lots of fun new content coming up over there. We're working our way to 4,500 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and feed him Charo. He's very hungry. He wants ramen. In addition to the recipe videos, that's also where all of the live stream schedule lives. So if you're trying to find what we're going to be cooking next, that's a good place to start because I think that schedule goes out like 3 weeks, maybe more than that now. So you can definitely tune in and check out the ones that you're interested in. You can even, all of those schedules have a list of ingredients in the comments. So if you want, you can pick up the ingredients and you can cook stuff along with me, which is fun. Some people have started doing that. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here doing dishes, and please hop over, subscribe to the YouTube channel too. I'm very excited for the Jianbing that's coming up tomorrow. It's one of my favorites. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. What are we doing? So next Monday, so no stream tomorrow, but on Monday coming up, we're going to be doing, we're doing Japanese curry, which is one of my favorites because you could cook. Japanese curry, we're doing a white miso Japanese curry, which is one of my favorites to do for food prep. So you could cook a whole bunch of it and you could probably feed yourself for like the rest of the week on that Japanese curry because it's just slow cooked, kind of like a bolognese sauce or a lasagna. So that's coming up on Monday's stream, and lots of fun content coming up after that. All right. Thanks everyone. See you soon. Everybody wants to be the baby. wants to be different. They still got dreams, but they don't love me like they used to love it. And I'm reminded of how bad I used to want it. And yes, I still got dreams, but more like a token of my 20s, and it's breaking me down. Oh, no. Want to be, baby, yes I do you want to be?
Think I'll dust them off, put them back up on the shelf. Case my little baby girl is in need. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Got another mouth to feed. Leave it with the babysitter, mama call the grave digger. Gone with the falling leaves. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might have had your fill, I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, I can feel it still. We can fight a war for peace. Give in to that easy living, goodbye to my hopes and dreams. Stop flipping for my enemies. We could wait until the walls come down. It's time to give a little to the kids in the middle, but oh, until it falls, won't bother me.